You don't need fireworks or fancy words to get your readers interested, so forget about hooks and focus on exigences instead. As writers, we all face the problem that nobody has to read what we create. At any point, our audience can decide they've had enough and go find their entertainment somewhere else. Unfortunately, when I talk to new writers about attracting and holding their audience's attention, they almost always start talking about having a good hook. And I say that's unfortunate because what are we doing when we're focusing on hooks? Webster's dictionary defines hook as a curved or bent device. Did you know that for thousands of years, society has used hooks to, with my patented hook system, I'll solve all your writing problems for just 10 easy payments. Usually hooks end up being cheap tricks designed to make a flashy first impression and then not much else. And sure, good first impressions are important, but catching someone's attention is not the same thing as keeping it. At best, a good hook will make a surprising impression and wear off pretty quick. But at worst, a bad hook will misrepresent your work and invite the dreaded accusation of clickbait. So if you're thinking that you need a flashy, superficial trick at the beginning of whatever you're writing, I'd like to show you a better way. A way to help you move beyond flimsy hooks and into the realm of exigences. If we're taking Lloyd Bitzer's word for it, an exigence is an imperfection marked by urgency. It's something that's not quite right, but that's also on a timer. In other words, we need to do something about an exigence, and we need to do something about it soon. And that's what makes an exigence the driving force of any meaningful work. You point your audience to an imperfection, which gets them invested in seeing how things will resolve, and you give it a sense of urgency, which pushes your reader along in eager anticipation of the result. And depending on what you're writing, your exigence can take different forms. Stories find their exigence in a source of conflict, and readers stay invested to see how that conflict will resolve. Poems often arise from some kind of arresting observation that gets satisfied in a meaningful insight. Persuasive arguments often find their exigence in a problem that works toward a proposed solution. And research papers begin with a question or a lack of knowledge that then resolves in an answer. Whatever you're working on, though, all exigences serve the same purpose. They provide the initial spark to get your writing project going by setting up some kind of initial dissatisfaction that reels the audience in to see how things will work out. Where a hook makes a shallow first impression, an exigence creates fundamental value. We're not just dazzled by your opening sentence, we're invested in your project from start to finish. To see what I mean, let's look at a little story that lacks a clear exigence, but maybe does start with something like a typical hook. On a hot, clear day in July, the most beautiful and joyful day of the year, the watermelon ran to the clothing store and went inside. About a half hour later, our protagonist emerged, dressed in a new outfit, and made their way home at a leisurely pace. There's no clear reason for this story to exist. Who cares? Why are you telling me this? There's no conflict, no spark, no initial dissatisfaction to drive the story forward. As a result, the ending feels like an arbitrary stopping point. Cool story, I guess. But then what happens when we add an exigence? With a ravenous Parasaurolophus in hot pursuit, the watermelon ran into the clothing store and hid inside. Once the hungry hadrosaur had moved on, our protagonist emerged, disguised as an unappetizing turkey, and cautiously slunk back home. See the difference? An exigence gave us all a reason to be here. It gave the characters and story and even the reader a real motivation. A hungry dinosaur is definitely an imperfection marked by urgency, so the story isn't just a collection of arbitrary events. It's a purposeful move from initial conflict to meaningful resolution. Without an exigence, you're just giving your audience information and hoping they'll maybe bring their own intrinsic interest in what you have to say. Frame your work with a compelling exigence, though, and you're giving your audience information with direction and purpose. And because of that, an exigence creates sustainable interest in a way that traditional hooks just never could. Once you get some practice at pulling your readers in with a good exigence, you might want to think about these more advanced exigence-related strategies. First, remember that your exigence for creating the work might not be the same as your audience's exigence for reading it. You might want to make a video all about plate tectonics because you just think it's the coolest thing in the world and you can't stand keeping it bottled up inside, but your audience just doesn't feel that pressure. So find some urgent imperfection that's affecting your audience, and then show them how your knowledge of plate tectonics can give them a satisfying resolution. The question isn't, why do you want to write this? but it's why would your audience want to consume it? Second, after Lloyd Bitzer said that good rhetors were skilled at finding exigences and responding to them, Richard Vatz expanded on the idea and argued that skillful rhetors can create exigences by drawing the audience's attention to urgent imperfections that they might not be paying attention to. And a lot of creative writing works just this way. We probably don't walk around caring about red wheelbarrows or refrigerated plums, but William Carlos Williams frames those objects in compelling, motivating ways that makes us care about them like we never did before. Third, and finally, you definitely want a strong exigence to resolution arc for your project. But you can also do cool things by infusing your subsections with mini exigences and resolutions. It's like those weekly TV shows where nothing happens until the very end. There's some dramatic reveal of a pressing and devastating exigence, so you have to tune in next week to see how it all works out. Build a compelling hopscotch journey from one mini exigence and resolution to the next, and you'll be pulling your audience all the way from the beginning to a satisfying end. The value of a hook wears off after the first sentence, but the value of an exigence lasts for an entire piece. So instead of focusing on dressing up your first impression, prioritize building a strong foundation in some kind of urgent imperfection. When your audience is piqued by that initial satisfaction, they'll be much more invested in the value of your resolution. In other words, they'll care about what you have to say because you'll have shown them clearly why it matters. And when they care, well, that's when they'll truly be hooked. Not because you asked a clever rhetorical question right at the beginning, but because you set up your work around a strong exigence. So go give it a try. I know it will make all the difference. And then please come back next week to tell us all how it went. In the meantime, I'll look forward to seeing you then.